The old library smelled of dust and ancient parchment, its shelves groaning under the weight of forgotten knowledge. In the quiet, dimly lit room, the air was thick with the passage of time, as if the books themselves whispered secrets too long ignored. A single desk stood at the center, cluttered with open scrolls, faded maps, and ancient texts, each page bearing the marks of a past that had been deliberately hidden from the world. The lone figure seated at the desk was Dr. Elias Winterbourne, an expert in ancient languages and religious symbolism, though even he felt like a mere visitor in this sacred space of forgotten wisdom. For years, Elias had devoted his life to studying the enigmatic symbols embedded within ancient scriptures. The kind of symbols that had baffled scholars for centuries. Many of these symbols were found in the margins of the oldest biblical manuscripts. Their meanings obscured by time, their origins lost in the dust of history. But Elias, unlike many others, believed these symbols held more than just ancient riddles. He believed they were a key to something much larger, a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. Tonight, however, something was different. As the clock ticked into the early hours of the morning, Elias' eyes fell upon an unfamiliar manuscript, a text so ancient it seemed to almost radiate with an aura of mystery. It was an old parchment, its edges frayed, the ink faded but still legible. The script was unlike anything he had seen before, a combination of strange characters that seemed to pulse with an energy all their own. His heart quickened as he traced his fingers across the symbols, feeling an odd warmth emanating from the page. The manuscript seemed to call out to him, beckoning him to unlock its secrets. These symbols, they've been here all along, Elias whispered to himself, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. But why did no one ever see them for what they truly are? The symbols were not mere decorations, as had been previously believed. No, they were messages. They were a code, a language of the divine, hidden within the sacred scriptures for a reason. It was as if the very fabric of history itself had been woven with these symbols, waiting for the right person, the right moment, to unravel their meaning. Elias carefully unrolled the parchment further, his eyes scanning each line with intense focus. The more he studied, the more certain he became, this was no coincidence. This manuscript, this mysterious text, was the key to understanding something far beyond the history of religion. It was a blueprint, a map, a guide to something that had been lost to humanity for millennia. And he, Elias Winterbourne, had been chosen to uncover it. But as he deciphered the symbols, a question lingered in the back of his mind. If these messages were so important, why had they been hidden for so long? And more importantly, what would happen once the secrets they held were finally revealed to the world? Elias leaned closer to the ancient manuscript, the faint light from the candle casting long, flickering shadows across the text. His fingers traced the symbols once more, and as he did, something remarkable happened. It was as though the symbols themselves were alive, almost vibrating under his touch, pulsing with an energy he had never felt before. The closer he studied them, the clearer it became. These were no ordinary markings. They weren't just the decorative flourishes that were often found in ancient texts. They were deliberate, complex, and carried a significance beyond the mundane. His mind raced as he sifted through his knowledge of ancient languages and religious texts. The symbols on the parchment were like nothing he had ever encountered. A hybrid of known languages mixed with geometric patterns that suggested a deeper level of understanding. Some of the symbols resembled hieroglyphs, while others seemed to echo the ancient Sumerian script. Still, some were unfamiliar entirely, unique to this manuscript alone. Elias reached for his magnifying glass, carefully focusing the lens over one of the most intricate symbols. His eyes widened as the letters shifted slightly, almost as if the ink itself was alive, moving across the page in subtle, imperceptible ways. A chill ran down his spine as he considered the possibilities. Could these symbols be a form of divine communication, a language designed to transcend the limitations of time and space? Could this be the key? He muttered to himself, his voice barely a whisper. The key to unlocking the secrets of the universe? He had heard rumors, of course, rumors that certain symbols hidden within sacred texts held the power to reveal hidden knowledge. Secrets that had been intentionally concealed from the masses. Yet, he had always dismissed these stories as mere legend, the work of overzealous mystics or conspiracy theorists. But now, staring at the symbols before him, Elias couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut that something far more significant was at play. The manuscript was ancient, but the ink, surprisingly, was still clear, as if it had been freshly written. The paper itself, though aged and brittle at the edges, had a resilience to it that suggested it had been carefully preserved. There was no doubt in Elias' mind that this was no ordinary document. It was a relic, a key to something monumental. As he flipped through the manuscript, Elias was struck by the fact that the symbols appeared to follow a pattern. A code of sorts. Each page seemed to build upon the last, revealing fragments of a larger message that was hidden beneath layers of complexity. The more Elias studied, the more certain he became this was not just a religious text, nor was it a mere historical artifact. It was something much more profound. It was a map of knowledge, a map of divine secrets. But why had this manuscript remained hidden for so long? Why had it been buried, relegated to obscurity in the recesses of time? What had it been protecting? These questions began to consume Elias as he carefully transcribed the symbols onto a fresh sheet of paper. Determined to decipher their meaning, his mind drifted back to the stories he had read about secret societies and ancient orders. The ones that supposedly guarded esoteric knowledge. Was this manuscript connected to them? Was it a relic from one of these long-lost civilizations? Elias had always dismissed these ideas as fantastical, the stuff of myths and legends. But now, with the manuscript spread before him, the line between myth and reality began to blur. The symbols were not just decorative, they were instructions, guides to a hidden path. Elias began to realize that the more he decoded, the more the manuscript seemed to reveal a network of connections between ancient cultures, religions, and philosophies that had once seemed completely unrelated. There were references to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, to the Hebrew Kabbalah, and even to ancient Hindu texts. But what was their common thread? The discovery was exhilarating, but it was also unsettling. If this manuscript was indeed a key to unlocking hidden knowledge, what would happen once it was fully understood? What forces had worked to conceal it? And why had it remained hidden from the world for so long? Elias sat back in his chair, staring at the page before him. The symbols seemed to be mocking him, daring him to go further. There was something almost sentient about them, as if they were aware of his attempts to unravel their mysteries. It was as though they were testing him, pushing him to prove his worth, to show that he was worthy of understanding the divine knowledge they contained. A sudden thought crossed his mind, and with it came a rush of fear. What if he wasn't supposed to decipher these symbols? What if some knowledge was never meant to be understood by human minds? What if, by unlocking this ancient code, he was opening a door to something that could not be closed? He shook the thought away, his curiosity overpowering any fear. He had come too far to turn back now. There was no mistaking it. This was the breakthrough he had been searching for. The discovery that would change everything. But Elias knew that uncovering the truth would not be easy. It would require patience, perseverance, and, above all, an unwavering commitment to uncovering the mysteries of the past. As the hours ticked by, Elias' mind became consumed with the symbols, each one drawing him deeper into the manuscript's hidden world. The lines between reality and the unknown began to blur. It was as if he were no longer sitting in his quiet study, but instead journeying through time itself, uncovering the long-buried secrets of an ancient world. In the flickering candlelight, Elias continued to decode the symbols, one by one, his excitement mounting with each discovery. The more he uncovered, the more certain he became that this manuscript was not just a relic, it was a map, a guide to something far greater than he had ever imagined. And he, Elias Winterbourne, was on the verge of unlocking the greatest mystery the world had ever known. As the days passed, Elias became increasingly absorbed in the manuscript. What had started as a simple curiosity had now turned into an obsession. Each morning, he awoke to the same sense of urgency, as though the manuscript were calling him, urging him to continue deciphering its secrets. The study that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed more like a battleground between Elias and the text itself. With every symbol he uncovered, the mysteries only deepened, and the questions began to pile up, each more pressing than the last. Elias began to realize that the symbols weren't just individual pieces of a puzzle. They formed an intricate web, a complex network of interrelated concepts that spanned centuries of human thought and belief. The more he decoded, the more he saw patterns emerging, patterns that connected the ancient Egyptians with the early Hebrews, The early Christians with the mystics of the East. The manuscript was not merely a text, but a bridge between cultures, a testament to the shared knowledge of a lost civilization. One symbol in particular caught his attention, a series of concentric circles, with smaller symbols arranged around them in a precise, almost mathematical order. The circles were surrounded by strange, angular markings that seemed to shift in form as he studied them. They resembled nothing he had seen in any known ancient language, but they seemed to have a sense of purpose, a deliberate design that could not be ignored. Elias traced the circles with his finger, the weight of the discovery heavy on his mind. What was their meaning? He had seen similar symbols in other ancient texts, but never in such a configuration. The concentric circles appeared to represent a cyclical pattern, something eternal, something that transcended the linear passage of time. Could this be a representation of the divine, of the eternal nature of creation? His thoughts raced as he turned the page, eager to see if the next set of symbols would provide more context. As he flipped through the manuscript, his eyes widened in shock. There, at the very end of the text, was a series of symbols that seemed to be written in a different ink, one that was darker and more vivid than the rest. It was as if they had been added at a later date, perhaps by a different hand altogether. Elias paused, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The symbols were not the same as the ones he had been decoding. They were more complex, more abstract, and their meaning was elusive, slipping away every time he tried to focus on them. It was as if they were a new code entirely, a code that had been hidden within the manuscript for a reason. He spent hours poring over the new set of symbols, attempting to decipher their meaning, but they eluded him at every turn. He could feel the frustration building inside him, the nagging feeling that he was on the verge of something momentous, yet unable to grasp it. The symbols danced before his eyes, just beyond his comprehension, like a tantalizing puzzle that refused to be solved. Then, in a moment of clarity, something clicked. It wasn't the symbols themselves that he needed to focus on, but the way they interacted with the rest of the manuscript. He began to see that the new symbols were connected to the concentric circles, almost as though they were a key that would unlock the full meaning of the text. The angular markings surrounding the circles were not just random designs, but a coded sequence that, when aligned with the new symbols, revealed a hidden message. Elias felt a rush of excitement as he began to reconstruct the puzzle in his mind. The new symbols, when paired with the concentric circles, seemed to create a map of the cosmos, of the heavens, and of the mysteries of existence. The angular markings, once thought to be meaningless, were coordinates, points in space and time, locations where the sacred knowledge had been hidden throughout history. His heart raced as he continued to work, his mind spinning with the possibilities. The manuscript was not just a collection of ancient symbols, it was a guide, a roadmap to something much greater. It was as though the text had been waiting for someone like him to unlock its secrets. Someone who could connect the dots, who could see the connections between seemingly unrelated elements. Elias realized that what he was holding in his hands was not just a relic of the past, but a key to the future. But even as his understanding deepened, Elias couldn't shake the sense of dread that hung over him. What would happen if the full meaning of the manuscript was revealed? What truths would come to light? And who else, besides him, would seek to understand these secrets? He thought back to the stories he had read, the legends of ancient societies that had guarded hidden knowledge so powerful that it could alter the course of history. He had dismissed those stories as mere fantasy. But now, with the manuscript in his hands, he wasn't so sure. What if there were others who sought this knowledge? People who would stop at nothing to possess it? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. Elias had always considered himself a seeker of truth, but now he wondered if he was in over his head. The manuscript was leading him into uncharted territory, into realms of knowledge that had been deliberately obscured for centuries. And yet, the lure of discovery was too strong to resist. Elias knew he could not stop now. He was too close to the truth, too close to uncovering the hidden history of the world. The manuscript held the answers to questions that had plagued humanity for millennia. It was a treasure trove of ancient wisdom, a legacy left behind by a civilization that had understood truths far beyond the reach of modern science. But as he continued his work, Elias couldn't help but feel that time was running out. The more he uncovered, the more he realized how fragile the balance of history was. The knowledge contained within the manuscript was powerful, but it was also dangerous. And he was beginning to understand why it had been hidden away for so long. As the days turned into weeks, Elias felt the weight of the manuscript pressing down on him. Each new discovery seemed to bring him closer to a deeper understanding, but also to a greater sense of unease. The symbols, once so cryptic and elusive, were beginning to reveal their true meaning, and with each revelation, Elias felt himself drawn further into a world of secrets, a world that held more power and danger than he had ever imagined. Elias could feel the weight of his discoveries pressing down on him. The symbols, once cryptic and indecipherable, were now taking shape, slowly revealing their true meaning. The concentric circles, the angular markings, and the hidden codes, they were all part of something far larger, something that transcended time and space. The manuscript was not just a relic from the past, it was a living, breathing entity that contained the keys to understanding the very fabric of the universe. Yet, the more Elias uncovered, the more he realized that his journey was far from over. There were still gaps in his understanding, still pieces of the puzzle that eluded him, and then there was the lingering sense of dread, the growing feeling that he was not alone in his quest. The manuscript had been hidden for centuries, perhaps even millennia, for a reason, and now that he was on the brink of unlocking its secrets, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that others were watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake, to stumble. As the days turned into weeks, Elias became more isolated. His once orderly life was now consumed by the manuscript, by the codes and symbols that filled every corner of his mind. He no longer slept soundly, his dreams filled with strange visions of ancient civilizations, of gods and kings, of wars fought over knowledge. His waking hours were spent poring over the manuscript, tirelessly decoding the symbols, trying to make sense of the patterns that seemed to shift and change with every new discovery. One evening, as Elias sat hunched over the manuscript, his mind racing, there was a sudden knock at the door. The sound startled him, pulling him out of his thoughts. He hadn't been expecting anyone. He had been so absorbed in his work that he had lost track of time. Reluctantly, he stood up and walked to the door, his heart pounding in his chest. When he opened it, he was met by the sight of a tall, imposing man dressed in a dark suit. His face was sharp, his eyes cold and calculating. The man introduced himself as Samuel Blackwood, a scholar of ancient history and religious texts, though there was something about him that immediately set Elias on edge. Samuel's presence felt like an intrusion, like a shadow that had suddenly fallen over the room. "I've been following your work, Professor Winterbourne," Samuel said, his voice smooth and measured, "and I believe we may have much to discuss." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea how Samuel had found him, but he knew instantly that this man was no ordinary scholar. There was a sense of urgency in his tone, a hidden agenda that Elias couldn't quite place. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to," Elias replied, trying to maintain his composure. "I've been busy with my research, but I don't know who you are or how you know about my work." Samuel's lips curled into a slight smile. "You may not realize it, but your research has caught the attention of more people than you think. And there are those who would be very interested in what you've uncovered, what you're about to uncover." Elias' heart raced. He had suspected that there were others who knew about the manuscript, but to hear it from a stranger's lips made his stomach tighten with unease. Who were these people, and why had they been watching him? "Who are you working for?" Elias asked, his voice steady despite the fear rising inside him. Samuel's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. "Let's just say I'm here on behalf of those who believe that the knowledge within that manuscript is far too dangerous to remain in your hands. There are powers at play, Professor, powers that would stop at nothing to ensure that this knowledge never sees the light of day." Elias took a step back, his mind spinning. He had known, deep down, that the manuscript was not just a relic of history. It was a weapon, a key to something far more powerful than anything he had imagined. But now that he was face to face with this stranger, he realized that he had stumbled into a much larger conspiracy, one that stretched far beyond the academic world. "Why should I trust you?" Elias asked, his voice sharp. "How do I know you're not one of them?" Samuel's eyes hardened, but his voice remained calm. "Because I've seen the consequences of what happens when this knowledge falls into the wrong hands. You may think you're uncovering the truth, but you're not the only one looking for it. There are others, powerful forces, who have spent centuries guarding these secrets. Elias' mind raced as he tried to process everything Samuel was saying. He had known that his discoveries were important, but he hadn't realized just how far-reaching their implications were. This wasn't just about understanding ancient symbols, it was about controlling knowledge that could reshape the world. "I don't understand," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" Samuel stepped closer, his voice lowering. "We don't want anything from you, Professor. We simply want to ensure that the manuscript stays out of the wrong hands. You may think you're doing the world a service by unlocking these secrets, but sometimes ignorance is a blessing." Elias felt a surge of anger. "You want to keep the truth hidden? You want to silence me?" Samuel shook his head. "No, Professor. We want to protect the world from the dangers of knowledge. Some things are better left buried." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Elias could feel the weight of them pressing down on him. This wasn't just about the manuscript anymore. It was about the very nature of truth, and the consequences of uncovering it. As Samuel turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Elias. You've already come too far, and there's no turning back now. But be warned, there are those who will stop at nothing to see you fail." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Elias standing alone in the dim light of his study. The manuscript lay open before him, its symbols more daunting than ever. He had been warned, but Elias knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back. He was on the precipice of discovering something far greater than himself. Something that could change the course of history. After the visit from Samuel Blackwood, Elias could feel the atmosphere in his study shift. The manuscript, which had once seemed like a curious puzzle to be solved, now felt like a weapon, dangerous, potent, and fraught with peril. Samuel's warning echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain: "Some things are better left buried." But Elias was no stranger to danger. In fact, it was precisely the allure of uncovering the unknown that had drawn him to this path. And now, with his research teetering on the brink of revelation, there was no turning back. That night, Elias sat alone in his study, the dim light from his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The manuscript lay open before him, its pages filled with strange symbols and hidden messages, like an ancient map waiting to be followed. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edge of his perception, waiting for him to make a mistake. But Elias was resolute. He had come too far to stop now. The manuscript held the keys to answers that had eluded scholars for centuries. It was a puzzle that, once solved, would change everything he knew about history, religion, and the very nature of existence. As he continued to study the manuscript, Elias began to notice something new, patterns that had been hidden from him before. The concentric circles, the angular markings, and the cryptic symbols weren't just part of a visual code. They seemed to contain a deeper meaning, one that transcended their physical form. The symbols were like a language of the divine, a code that linked humanity's past with its future. Elias had unlocked something profound, something that connected ancient civilizations with the present day. But with each new discovery came a growing sense of unease. The knowledge he was uncovering felt overwhelming, as though he was on the verge of grasping something that mankind was never meant to understand. It was as if the manuscript was a door, and each page he turned brought him closer to a threshold that could not be undone. It wasn't long before Elias realized that the symbols weren't just a code, they were a prophecy. The more he decoded, the clearer it became that the manuscript contained not only the history of mankind but also a roadmap to the future. It spoke of events that had yet to occur, of great shifts in power, and of forces that would reshape the world as they knew it. And at the center of it all was a single, unspoken truth: the secrets within the manuscript could change the course of human history forever. Elias felt his pulse quicken as he deciphered the final set of symbols. They were different from the others, more intricate, more urgent. They seemed to pulse with an energy that he could feel deep within his chest. This was it, the final key. He was about to unlock the last part of the puzzle, the piece that would reveal everything. But just as his fingers hovered over the manuscript, a cold chill swept through the room, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Elias froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't alone. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. The shadows seemed to shift, to move with an unnatural rhythm. And then, From the corner of the room, a figure emerged, a tall man, cloaked in black. His face was hidden in shadow, but Elias could feel the weight of his presence. It was as though the man was made of darkness itself, his very being exuding a sense of malevolence. Elias took an instinctive step back, his hand hovering near the manuscript as if to protect it. The figure remained silent, watching him with an intensity that sent a wave of cold dread through his veins. Elias knew, without a doubt, that this man was no ordinary person. He was part of something much larger, something that had been watching Elias from the shadows long before Samuel Blackwood's visit. "You've come too far, Elias," the figure said, his voice low and menacing. "The manuscript is not meant for you." Elias swallowed hard, his mind racing. Who was this man, and why had he come now, just as Elias was about to unlock the final secret? "I won't stop," Elias said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "I'm not afraid of you." The figure's lips twisted into a smile, though it was a smile devoid of warmth. "You should be afraid. You have no idea what you're meddling with. The forces you are awakening are beyond your comprehension. You're playing with fire, Elias." Elias stood his ground, his resolve hardening. "I'm seeking the truth, and I won't stop until I find it." The man's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. "The truth is a dangerous thing, Elias. Some truths are meant to remain hidden, and there are people who will do anything to ensure that they stay buried." As the figure stepped closer, Elias could feel the air grow colder, heavier. The presence of the man was suffocating, like a dark cloud that threatened to swallow him whole. But Elias didn't flinch. He had come too far, and he wasn't about to back down now. "I'm not afraid of you," Elias repeated, his voice rising. "I've spent my entire life searching for the truth, and I won't let anyone stop me." The figure's eyes flashed with something, anger, or perhaps disdain, but he didn't respond. Instead, he took a step back, his figure dissolving into the shadows, leaving Elias standing alone once more in the dim light of his study. The room felt emptier than before, as if the very air had been drained of its life. But Elias wasn't shaken. If anything, he was more determined than ever. He knew that the forces against him were powerful, but they couldn't stop the truth from being revealed, and he would see it through, no matter the cost. With trembling hands, Elias returned his focus to the manuscript. The final symbols beckoned him, their secrets waiting to be uncovered. He could feel the weight of the knowledge pressing down on him, urging him to continue, and so he did. As he traced the final set of symbols, a wave of understanding washed over him. The manuscript had not been a gift, it had been a test. And now, Elias had passed it. The last key fell into place, revealing the ultimate truth. The knowledge contained within the manuscript was not just a record of the past, it was the blueprint for the future. But as Elias absorbed the final revelation, he realized that the truth he had uncovered came with a price. The future, as it was laid out before him, was a fragile thing. The choices he made from here on out would shape the destiny of mankind. One wrong step, and everything could unravel. Elias sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. The path ahead was clear now, but it was also fraught with danger. The manuscript had shown him the way, but it had also revealed the dark forces that would stop at nothing to prevent its truths from being known. And Elias knew that his quest for knowledge was far from over. It had only just begun. Elias felt as if he had crossed a line, an invisible threshold that separated him from the world he once knew. With every page of the manuscript he turned, every symbol he deciphered, he was stepping deeper into a maze of mysteries that no one had ever dared to explore. The final revelation had unlocked a path, one that led into the heart of something ancient and powerful. But it was also a path that threatened to consume him. For the first time, Elias found himself doubting his decision. Was it worth it? Was this knowledge worth the price he had already begun to pay? His life had already begun to unravel. Strange things were happening. The shadows in his study seemed to grow longer, more menacing with each passing hour. Whispers lingered in the air, and the manuscripts that once felt like simple objects of study now seemed like living, breathing entities, aware of his every move. He thought about the dark figure who had appeared in his study just the night before, the one who had warned him against proceeding. The man's words haunted him. "The forces you are awakening are beyond your comprehension. You're playing with fire." Elias could feel the weight of those words pressing down on him like a heavy, suffocating fog. What had he unleashed? But Elias couldn't stop now. He couldn't turn back. The truth was too important. He had come too far. And yet, the further he delved into the manuscript, the more he realized that this wasn't just about uncovering the past, it was about confronting something much larger than himself. The manuscript was not simply a record of ancient events, it was a map of human destiny. A guide to the forces that had shaped history and would continue to do so in the future. Elias had seen glimpses of this future in the symbols, the impending conflicts, the rise and fall of empires, the quiet movements of power behind the scenes. It was all laid out before him, like a complex web of interwoven fates, each thread pulling him closer to a center he couldn't yet understand. But with the knowledge came danger. Elias knew that there were those who would stop at nothing to prevent this information from being revealed. Samuel Blackwood had warned him about these forces, but Elias had no idea how far-reaching their influence was. Were they already watching him, waiting for him to make a move? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Elias jumped, his heart racing. He had been so absorbed in his work that he hadn't noticed how the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The air had become thick with tension, and now, standing in front of him was a familiar figure, Eleanor, the young scholar who had been assisting him with his research. "Eleanor," Elias said, forcing a smile as he tried to steady his breath. "I didn't hear you come in." She stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern. "Elias, what's going on? You've been in here for days without rest." I'm worried about you." Elias ran a hand through his hair, trying to push away the unease that had taken root in his mind. "I'm fine, Eleanor, just a little caught up in this research. I've made a breakthrough." Eleanor stepped closer, glancing at the open manuscript on the desk. Her gaze lingered on the cryptic symbols and the diagrams that filled the pages. "I can see that," she said quietly, "but Elias, this is dangerous. What you're looking at, what you're uncovering, it's not just history. There's more to it, isn't there?" Elias hesitated. He knew she was right, but he couldn't bring himself to say it aloud. The manuscript held more than just answers, it held the power to change everything. And now, with Eleanor in front of him, the weight of the responsibility felt heavier than ever. "Eleanor, you don't understand," Elias said, his voice strained. This is bigger than anything we've ever imagined. The symbols, the messages, they're not just clues about the past. They're a blueprint for the future. And if I can unlock the rest of it, everything could change. Eleanor's face softened, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. "You're not thinking of doing this alone, are you? You need help. Whatever this is, it's too much for one person to carry. And if you keep going down this path, I fear you won't be able to turn back." Elias's heart clenched. He had always been a solitary figure, relying on his own intellect and instincts to guide him. But something about Eleanor's words struck a chord deep inside him. She was right, he couldn't do this alone. The stakes were too high. "I know," Elias admitted, his voice quiet, "but I have no choice. Eleanor, I'm so close, just a little more, and I'll have everything I need. I promise you, I won't go down this path without you. But I have to finish this." Eleanor's eyes searched his face, trying to gauge whether he was telling the truth. Finally, she nodded, her expression softening. "All right, Elias, I'll help you, but promise me that you'll be careful. You don't know what you're dealing with." Elias gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be careful." But deep down, Elias knew that there was no such thing as careful when it came to the secrets he was about to uncover. The manuscript had already set its course, and there was no stopping it now. Together, they began to work through the final set of symbols. As they did, Elias could feel the ground beneath him shifting. The more they decoded, the more the future became clear. The patterns, the connections, they were all leading to a singular event, one that would change the world as they knew it. But just as they were about to reach the end, something unexpected happened. The symbols began to shift on their own, rearranging themselves before Elias's eyes. It was as if the manuscript itself was alive, reacting to their efforts. And with that sudden movement, a door, an actual door, appeared on the page. Elias's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment. The final answer was within his grasp. But as he reached out to touch the door, a voice rang out behind him. "Elias, stop!" He turned, his heart racing, and there, standing in the doorway, was Samuel Blackwood, his face grim. "I warned you, Elias. Blackwood said, his voice thick with urgency. You've gone too far, you have no idea what you're about to unleash. Elias felt a cold wave of dread wash over him. He had been so close to understanding it all. But now, with Samuel's warning echoing in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that the door in the manuscript was not a gateway to knowledge, but to something far more dangerous. Elias stood motionless, staring at the door in the manuscript that had materialized before him. It was a bizarre sight, impossibly clear, as though it was beckoning him to cross into an unknown realm. The intricate symbols around the door glowed softly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, urging him to unlock the mystery that had been buried for millennia. The air around him thickened, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. But then came Samuel Blackwood's voice, sharp and commanding, shaking Elias out of his trance-like state. Elias, stop! Blackwood's words were desperate, filled with a raw fear that Elias had never seen before. The door was no longer just a curiosity, it was a warning. A warning of something dark, something beyond comprehension. This is not the answer you think it is. Elias's mind raced. He had come so far. He had spent years deciphering the codes, uncovering secrets that were meant to remain hidden. The symbols on these pages had guided him through paths of wisdom, of history, and of prophecy. He had always believed that unlocking these secrets would reveal the ultimate truth, a truth that would elevate humanity to new heights of understanding. But now, in the face of this door, that vision felt more like an illusion, a mirage that was fading with every word Samuel spoke. Samuel, you don't understand, Elias said, his voice trembling despite his attempts to stay composed. This is the truth we've been searching for. The symbols, the prophecies, they are all leading to this. It's not just history, it's the future, it's everything. Samuel stepped forward, his face pale and taut with anxiety. Elias, you're on the verge of making a terrible mistake. I've seen this before, people who were consumed by their search for knowledge, only to be destroyed by it. This door, he said, his voice faltering, is not a gift, it is a curse. For a long moment, there was silence, a profound stillness that seemed to stretch on forever. Elias glanced from Samuel to the glowing door, and then back at the manuscript. His hands trembled. He wanted to believe that Samuel was wrong. He wanted to believe that the truth was worth the risk, that it was his destiny to unlock the final mystery. But deep down, something was telling him that this door wasn't just a gateway, it was a test. The symbols on the page were not just guiding him, they were warning him. The same way a storm cloud warns of impending danger. The closer he got to the truth, the more the symbols became distorted, shifting into patterns that seemed too chaotic to comprehend. The path he had followed had led him here, but it also felt like it had led him astray. Elias turned to face Samuel, his voice quieter this time, as if trying to grasp hold of the final pieces of his sanity. What do you mean by curse? Samuel, what's behind this door? Samuel hesitated, his eyes darting between Elias and the manuscript. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with a somber truth. It's not just knowledge, Elias, it's power, dangerous, uncontrollable power. Those who have unlocked these symbols in the past, those who have reached this door, have been consumed by it. Some say they went mad, others say they simply vanished, taken by forces beyond our understanding. Elias swallowed hard. The weight of Samuel's words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had always believed that knowledge was the ultimate key, that understanding would free him from the chains of ignorance. But now, in the face of Samuel's warning, it felt as though he was standing on the precipice of something far darker than he could have imagined. What should I do then? Elias asked, his voice raw with emotion. Turn my back on all of this? Let the secrets remain hidden forever? Samuel looked at him with a mixture of pity and sorrow. Sometimes, Elias, the truth is not meant to be known. Some doors are meant to stay closed. You've uncovered enough. The price for more may be too high. Elias stood in silence, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The symbols in the manuscript were still glowing, beckoning him toward the unknown. He could feel the power pulsing from the pages, like an invisible hand pulling him toward it. He had come so far, he couldn't just walk away. But as the seconds passed, doubt crept in, and with it, the creeping realization that there was no going back. Finally, he spoke. I have to know. I can't live with the question unanswered. Whatever the price, I'm willing to pay it. with trembling hands, Elias reached toward the door in the manuscript. The symbols twisted and wreathed, becoming more intricate and complex. But Elias felt a strange calm wash over him. It was as if he had made peace with the consequences of his actions. The moment he touched the door, the world around him seemed to vanish. The room blurred, the light dimmed, and he was no longer in his study. Suddenly, he was standing in a vast, empty void. The only thing he could see was the door, now solid and real in front of him, its intricate patterns glowing with an otherworldly light. As he stepped forward, the door slowly creaked open, revealing an expanse beyond that was both familiar and alien at the same time. Elias felt his breath catch in his throat. Beyond the door lay an infinite landscape, endless fields of light and shadow, swirling in perfect harmony, where time itself seemed to stretch and contract in impossible ways. It was as if he was standing at the threshold of creation itself, witnessing the blueprint of existence. But even as Elias marveled at the sight, a sense of overwhelming dread filled his heart. The knowledge that lay beyond this threshold was vast, beyond human comprehension. It was not just the history of the past or the fate of the future, it was the very nature of the universe, of life, death, and everything in between. Elias realized then that the door had not only opened to knowledge but also to a burden of responsibility, of understanding, and of power, the power to shape the future, to influence the course of history. But with that power came a price, one that Elias was only beginning to understand. As he stepped into the unknown, a voice echoed in the void, soft and haunting, like a whisper from the very fabric of the universe. Are you ready, Elias, to bear the weight of all that you seek? Elias's heart pounded in his chest as he took another step forward, knowing that the journey he had started so long ago was about to reach its final destination. The answers were here, just within his grasp, but so was the price. The true cost of unlocking the secrets of the universe was not just knowledge, it was the very essence of his soul. And as the door closed behind him, Elias stepped into eternity,